Funding for Shaperillis is provided by
Squarespace, the sponsor of today's video. You know, as someone who's seen every single Disney animated movie in order to rank all of them 2 years ago, I should really put my knowledge of them all to good use in another way. How about we take a look at each one of the studio's villains? Everybody loves Disney villains. They're so deliciously, unapologetically evil, and often the most memorable characters in the movie they're from. I mean, that's not always the case, but whoo boy, when these guys hit, you're left with one of the most iconic villains in all of cinema. But for every absolute evil icon the studio has given us, there's definitely a ton more that really kinda suck. So I figured it was my duty to go over each and every one with a fine-tooth comb, determining which ones are peak and which ones are King Magnifico. Ooh, sorry to kick Wish while it's down, it's just too easy. I will say before we get into this, a couple of ground rules. We're only looking at the 63 animated features from Walt Disney Animation Studios, from Snow White all the way to Moana 2. We're not including Pixar villains. I mean, obviously, I already ranked them all. And we're also not including any TV shows or direct-to-DVD sequels. I know, I would love to talk about Sarouche or the Tim Curry organ again, but it's just not meant to be, you guys. That also means for villains who appear in both the original films and their direct-to-DVD sequels, I'm only going to be looking at how they are in the original film, just for the sake of fairness and simplicity. Just like the Pixar ranking, I'm also only going to be taking one villain per movie, whoever I consider to be the main villain, just so this doesn't go on forever. There are also some movies that don't have villains, and those in my opinion are Dumbo, the Winnie the Pooh movies, Brother Bear, Bolt, Ralph Breaks the Internet, Encanto, Strange World, and of course I'm not going to include any of the package films from the 40s that consisted of multiple stories within a single film. Nor am I including the Fantasia movies. Sorry Chernabog, you're really cool, but you were also basically just the villain of a slightly abstract short. I don't really think you count for the sake of this. With all this in mind, I ended up landing on a roster of 47 villains. So let's see who's the baddest of the bad, and let's see who's just really bad at being bad. They will never be bad, and that's not good. I don't know, man. Let's just get the fucking thing started.
Disappointment in the game of life.
Lady and the Tramp might have pulled off the greatest hat trick in terrible villainy I've ever seen. I was actually rather unsure whether to count 3 different villains as the main one for the purposes of this list. But what's truly remarkable is the fact that no matter which one I picked, all 3 of them would have easily taken the bottom spot on this list for completely different reasons from each other. Well, to be fair, they all do have one thing tying them together as villains. They're all not really in the movie that much at all. It's a little bit more of a vibe movie without an overarching antagonist behind everything. But with that said, it does have some villains that do technically count for the purposes of this ranking. Let's go through the dishonorable mentions. There's the racist Siamese cats. Yeah, beyond the obvious reason why they'd be a shoo-in for last place, they also cause mischief in one scene and then disappear from the movie entirely. And yet, this is what won the Twitter poll for who should count as the main villain. Guys, I think you might have been wrong about this one. Just a tad. There's also the rat who shows up in the final 10 minutes of the movie to attack the baby and instigate a last-minute conflict. This is a non-character with zero presence whatsoever. He doesn't hold a candle against any other Disney villain in existence for equally obvious reasons. But ultimately, when determining the main villain of Lady and the Tramp, I landed on Aunt Sarah, somehow the most presentable main antagonist in this film, and yet she's also by far the lamest and worst Disney villain of all time, with absolutely no competition for that coveted title. She has maybe 2 or 3 minutes of screen time, where all she does is get mad at Lady and Tramp. She wants to put a muzzle on Lady, and she calls the pound on Tramp. That's it. Those are the heinous actions of the main villain of this film. Yeah, she's a bit mean to animals and definitely a hateable enough character. Plus, she owns racist cats, which is another extremely questionable trait of hers. But come on, there's practically nothing to work with here. She's not nefarious, she's not funny, she's not memorable. She's unlikable for all the wrong reasons, not the fun, dastardly reasons that make other Disney villains a joy to watch. And to top all of that off, she's only in a tiny fraction of the film. It is genuinely impossible for me to rank her above any other Disney villain in existence in good conscience. Obviously, there are ones I dislike more, or who are way more heavily flawed, but at least they gave me something to work with, damn it! This is a nothing character from a quite frankly, almost nothing movie. Yeah, as someone who isn't even really a fan of Lady and the Tramp in general, it should not be all that surprising that its villain is kind of the worst of the worst, in my opinion. Fortunately, we literally can't go lower than this.
What was a butler, the Jeeves of his time?
If there's anyone that I could reasonably call nobody's favorite Disney villain, it would have to be Edgar from the Aristocats. I mean, oh my god, what a lame villain! He's not funny, he's not intimidating, his plan is stupid, he just kinda sucks. Okay, so the lore is that this old lady is gonna give all of her belongings and riches to her cats, and then her butler Edgar will get all of it when the cats die. Do you really think the cats are going to be able to use all that stuff? Do you really think a court of law is going to uphold this? Well, apparently he does, because he decides to dispose of them. Except he's too chicken shit to actually kill them, so he just puts sleeping powder in their milk and then ditches them on the side of the highway. Okay, what if they are found or make their way back to the house? Which they do in this movie. Is he stupid? Anyway, they come back, but he catches them again and decides to ship them to Timbuktu, which he could have just done the first time to completely negate the chance of them returning without having to kill them. I don't know, man. Questioning his logic wouldn't really be necessary if he was entertaining in the slightest, but he's just so boring and dull and forgettable, and I think I'm just repeating myself at this point. There's nothing to say about Edgar. He sucks. If I can't think of a single thing I liked about a villain, then I think that's a sign that they're gonna have to be near the bottom of this list. Only outdoing Aunt Sarah, because there's the mildest of malicious intent behind his actions. Sorry to all the Edgar fans. Oh wait, I'm just kidding. There are none.
I'm leaving you. Is it because my mom's a sheep?
Well, I guess I gotta talk about these characters again. I'll keep this brief, because unlike most of my other old videos, I think my original one on Twist Villains holds up pretty well, and you can hear my extended thoughts on this trio there. But to summarize, the worst of the three, don't you guys like it when a villain is revealed with 7 minutes left in the movie? Bellwether sucks ass. She's barely a character before the big reveal. There are no indications that she's the culprit behind everything, other than a blink and you'll miss it sticky note on her desk to call one of the drug guys. One other thing I didn't mention in my original video is that I just don't buy her as a villain. Like, I'm not intimidated by her in the slightest. Whereas at least Hans, and that was his mistake, do kind of have intimidating line deliveries post-reveal. And you might say, well, yeah, she's not supposed to be intimidating because she's a meek little sheep. Yes, that is her facade. I was kind of hoping that when the facade is gone, the real her would have more sinister and chilling line deliveries. I don't think that's a big ask, because in Emperor's New Groove, when Yzma turns into a cute little cat, she still sounds very murderous and scary. This is with a cat filter on her voice. She intimidates me more than the fucking main villain of Zootopia. And I honestly completely forgot about this, but she also does the whole I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die thing. Man, I love cliches. You just keep hitting the home runs, Disney! Okay, I genuinely don't want to talk about her ever again. This has gotta be the last time, right? I guess maybe I'll have to inevitably compare her to the main villain of Zootopia too. But I sincerely doubt whoever that is will be worse than her.
And this is the thanks I get?
Woo! Not last, not last, not last! I will give King Magnifico the following compliments. Chris Pine does a very good job voice acting. His design is cool enough. So anyway, now for why he sucks. I mean, I don't think I need to go into that much detail. This is kind of the most talked about bad Disney villain, and you've probably seen a million video essays breaking down why. To summarize, Disney clearly saw that we were craving an honest-to-God, pure evil, hateable villain without really understanding why their previous pure evil villains worked. Why does Magnifico have a tragic backstory that never gets expanded on? Seriously, it only serves to muddle the fun we're supposed to experience from seeing him go so gleefully evil. Speaking of which, he has maybe the lamest heel face turn out of any Disney villain. Oh no, he opened the magic book and the green magic was evil and it turned him crazy. Did they ever explain where he got the magic book? I don't think they did, but honestly, that's the least of this character's problems. Now that the green magic has possessed him and he starts making references to better Disney villains, his loving wife realizes that he's fully irredeemable and deserves to get trapped in a mirror in a dungeon for all eternity. Huh? I thought it was the book! Find a way to undo the book spell! Oh, I guess you can't do that. Okay.
No, James, you don't get it. She had to throw him in the dungeon because, you see, she's seen too many bad things that she can't keep out.
Hey, you want to see him do some cool sorcery now that he's a super epic green sorcerer? Honestly, you're an idiot for wanting that. He's gonna chain people to the ground and that's it. He's not gonna transform or do any crazy spells, dumbass. But oh man, is he so threatening. Wow, don't you feel so much danger emanating from him? So like, what was his plan here? Was he just gonna keep them chained to the ground forever? He eats all the wishes. Then now what? What's the end goal? Oh good, we can stop him by wishing for it. We're singing our heart song and that makes him die. We did it. That wasn't lame at all. Oh, good news, he has a villain song. You guys like villain songs, right? Well, here it is.
And this is the thanks I get. This is the thanks I get.
Yeah, like I said, there's really nothing new to say about this guy. I didn't really think he deserved last place, because at least there is stuff to talk about with him. Like, say what you will about him, he's definitely not forgettable. Honestly, he might just be the best character in the movie, which is really, really sad. But yeah, I would never say Shark Tale is the worst DreamWorks movie, because there's this undeniable, so bad it's good charm to it. So congratulations to King Magnifico. Truly the Shark Tale of Disney villains.
Mine! Success will be mine at last.
Why did you say it like that? As someone who really can't stand Pocahontas and considers it to be by far one of the worst Disney movies, yeah, I don't think it'll come as much of a surprise that I don't like its villain very much. Radcliffe is just kind of a complete joke. And like, I don't know, don't you think the vicious Native American hating leader of a group of European colonizers should be a little nefarious? I mean, he's the embodiment of some pretty heinous real world evil. And yet the movie constantly undermines him at every turn. Right from the start, they joke about how unpopular he is and what a pathetic social climber everyone sees him as. His villain song is aggressively comedic for some reason, which I can't fathom in the slightest. Nothing about him is remotely intimidating throughout the entirety of the film. Even at the end, when he expresses a lot of hateful rhetoric during Savages. I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of the terrible lyrics of the song don't help, but also, look at him, man. Look at his dumbass face while he's singing this. I don't know why they gave the most evil character in the movie one of the most cartoonish designs. I mean, yeah, let's be fair. A lot of evil people in the real world are also cartoonish and hard to take seriously, but I don't think that should affect how I feel about the story and tone of this movie. I think Radcliffe is an absolute embarrassment. The kind of villain you just look at and think, what are we doing here? I mean, he doesn't even meet Pocahontas during the movie. The main villain never meets the main protagonist until the second fucking movie. Truly terrible. Nobody's favorite Disney villain. Get him out of my sight.
Fine, I'll do it myself.
Well, gee, when I made most of this video's script, I didn't think I'd have to make an additional segment for Thanos. From Avengers 2012.
Who?
Yes, spoilers for Moana 2 if you give a shit, which honestly you really shouldn't. Turns out the main villain is some asshole who only shows up in the mid-credits scene. Somehow they managed to have him serve as the main villain while also teasing his actual character for a future installment. What a great quote-unquote movie. Yeah, so obviously this is insane and he has to rank low as a result, but I wouldn't call him the absolute worst, because at least they established him as a legitimate threat through this vicious storm he whips up. Like, the final act really ups the ante compared to anything these characters had to endure in the first movie. Maui is stripped of his demigod powers. Moana actually dies in the process of raising the island and breaking the curse. They both get better, obviously, because this is a movie for babies. But you know what? I will give Nalo, sorry, I had to look his name up, credit for accomplishing a few actually intimidating things, despite not even showing up in person. Basically, what I'm trying to say is he could have been worse. And even though the threat of him is pretty nebulous for the first 2/3 of the movie, I think the last third is enough to catapult him above actual detriments to their films, like Magnifico or Radcliffe. Let's just hope in the third movie he sends Tamatoa to do his bidding, and then Tamatoa can be the main villain of a movie for once. Or maybe he could just send the Bat Lady, who should have been the main villain of this movie. I am so tired.
The dinosaurs will turn to dust.
Honestly, the most interesting thing about Kron is that he has the same voice actor as Sebastian. That's cool, I never knew that. Yeah, Kron sucks. I mean, he's okay. He serves as a fine obstacle to the protagonist through his dickish and cold demeanor regarding the lives of the slower members of his herd. He functions, but he's not fun. Aside from the solid voice acting, nothing about this character is memorable or enjoyable. He's extremely one-dimensional and also kind of an idiot. Like, there's no reason not to believe Alador at the end that there's a better way to get to the Oasis, other than just, you're a stubborn dickhead. I don't know, man, he's kind of a nothing villain. Not offensively bad or anything, he serves his role just fine, but man, am I never gonna think about him again after this.
And what my dad thinks I'm a joke too.
It's hard to think of a more hateable Disney villain than Buck Cluck.
Yeah!
As the pathetic social climber who dismisses and neglects his own son's well-being and feelings in order to suck up to an unreasonably vicious town of jackasses, he certainly stacks up as one of the most despicable antagonists to ever come out of the studio. I mean, really, the aliens turn out to not be malicious at all since it's a misunderstanding. And Foxy Loxy is kind of a bully, but also really no different from the rest of the town and only existing in like 5 minutes of the movie. Chicken Little pours all of its antagonistic eggs, get it? Because chicken, fuck you, into Buck Cluck. But he's not like a fun villain. I don't get any enjoyment out of his borderline emotional abuse, nor Chicken Little's deeply upsetting desire to constantly live up to his lofty standards. It is very satisfying when Chicken Little calls him out on this in the climax, and I suppose it is nice to get a villainous redemption, but it doesn't feel especially earned. Overall, despite being a villain with a very callous and narcissistic demeanor, who does accomplish a lot in terms of driving the film's conflict, he's just not a cool or interesting villain to watch, unfortunately. Certainly a more effective central antagonist than the likes of Magnifico or Radcliffe, but I think this is about as high as I can put him. Dude, it's gonna be so funny seeing people in the comments actually take this part seriously. Yeah, I don't really think he's a Disney villain. I just thought this would be funny.
Because he's just marrying you so he can be king.
I don't look like Hans, okay? Yeah, just like the other two twist villains I've talked about to death in the past. On you, little man. I don't want to waste much time. I will give him some props in the sense that if only there was someone out there who loved you does go pretty hard. And then that's kind of it. The reveal worked for the time because it wasn't super obvious, but then you start to think about it and realize this wasn't built up at all and he only gets to be evil in the last 15 minutes of the movie, which is insane. And how does nobody confirm what he's saying is true about Anna dying? You'd think one person like the paranoid Duke of Weaseltown asking to see the body would completely foil his entire plan.
That's suspicious.
Also, Elsa would have made for a much more interesting main antagonist who could then become redeemable like John Silver or something. And no, genuinely, I think I've wasted enough time talking about Hans. He's a mess. He's not fun. Go watch my old ass video to learn more about why I don't like him. I'm glad Disney finally stopped doing these because, yeah, they suck. The Horned King is all style, no substance whatsoever. He is one of the coolest villains conceptually, who has the coolest design and coolest voice, and yet he still sucks complete ass, just like the fucking movie he came from. I hate the Black Cauldron. This guy accomplishes nothing. The main protagonist gets away from him because he splashes water in his face. Then he just sits back and dicks around for the rest of the movie until his subordinates get the titular cauldron for him. He summons the Army of the Dead, which is a cool ass sequence, but then he leaves the heroes chained in a room with the cauldron unattended, and the shitty comic relief sacrifices himself and breaks the cauldron, so the Army of the Dead don't get to do anything, and then the Horned King comes back in the room and the cauldron is sucking stuff up, and the main character kicks him and he stands too close to the cauldron as a result and he gets sucked up by it. That's how the main villain is defeated. He's so pathetic. He just feels like a placeholder. Like, Oh, this is where we're gonna put a really cool skeletal necromancer villain. But we haven't written an actual character yet, so here's a cardboard cutout that can mimic the aesthetics of that sort of villain. We'll get back to him. We'll write an actual character before the movie gets finished. Just trust me, guys. We'll get to it. Apparently, the Black Cauldron got really screwed up during production. Like, there's a sizable chunk of the movie missing from the final cut, thanks to who else? Jeffrey fucking Katzenberg. I don't know much about these deleted scenes, but maybe they would have made the Horned King into a functional villain. As is, I could say I like him better than the villains beneath him in the ranking, just because of his aesthetics and voice. Like, it's nice that a design this raw exists in a Disney movie, but oh my god, he's such an embarrassment otherwise. And he's only like the 5th worst thing about this movie. I don't like it, sorry.
Everything I told you the other night was a lie. Don't you trust me?
As much as I hate to waste another thought on Raya and the Last Dragon, the Twitter poll and the comments pretty overwhelmingly insisted that Namaari was the main villain of the movie. Look, as much as I hate her character and the way they quote-unquote redeemed her, I will say she does serve as a functional antagonist for the majority of the movie. It's pretty cool when she and Raya get into sword fights. She has an attitude, oh boy. Yeah, within the context of judging her as the villain of the movie, she's serviceable enough. And most of my problems with her come from the second half's insistence that she's not the villain. I'm not repeating myself about this movie, just watch my Raya vs. Encanto video for more details. Yeah, pretty whatever villain. At least she feels kinda threatening, I guess. Okay, for real, I don't think I have to talk about this movie again after this.
Where's that damn?
Okay, so I guess for the purposes of this list, we have to count Elsa's long-dead grandfather from Frozen 2, since he started the conflict of the movie all those years ago, despite not actually appearing in the present, only in snow flashbacks. Okay. Look, it's hard to say much, because he's not, you know, a character, but based on what they do show of him, I like the idea. How he fears magic and thinks people using it are trying to circumvent the will of a king. Like, that's a good basis for a villain. That's also all they show of him, so I don't know what else I can say. His plan to build a dam as an offering to the Northuldra, despite it really being used to weaken them, is kinda clever. And I do like how Frozen 2 has a solid theme of understanding and trying to make up for the sins of the father. Even if the movie is very messy in terms of developing that theme and balancing it with all the other shit going on. Yeah, I think that's about it. Good idea for a villain, but considering how the plot is set up, there aren't really many chances for us to see him in action as a villain. More effective than Hans, I guess, but not by much.
Bet you didn't expect him to be the bad guy?
He went in there to save you.
That was his mistake.
Yep! I was just gonna let that clip speak for itself. I don't think there's any more to add. But the more I thought about Callahan, the more I realized he's by far the best of the big 3 twist villains, because he's the only one that could have worked. Like, with some tweaks, he could have actually been good. I think it's a great idea to have the hero and the villain's methods of dealing with grief contrast with each other, with Hero having a great support system to deal with the loss of Tadachi, and thus coping with it much better, while Callahan, who doesn't have anyone, gets consumed by his thoughts of revenge. I really like the whole "was my daughter a setback" scene, because his anger there is completely justified. A big tech CEO like Cray being so dismissive of a life he lost feels unfortunately realistic, and Callahan's anger makes complete sense. He had the potential to be one of the most sympathetic and understandable Disney villains. But it all falls apart because of that one fucking line. Say it with me now.
That was his mistake.
Ah, shit.
That was his stake!
I don't know what possessed them to not write this guy as a real person. One who feels remorse for the needless death of Tadachi, because he's not an evil guy at heart. Just a misguided man consumed by a desire for revenge because of the loss of his daughter. But instead, it just feels like he is fucking evil. Who cares about my dead protege? It was his fault for going into a burning building to save people. Dumbass. It just drives me insane. He could have been good, could have been great even, but instead he's just an embarrassment. There are other things too that I've brought up in the past, like his plan to suck Cray's entire business up in the portal is kinda stupid, and the twist with him is so blatantly obvious despite the movie smugly insisting that it isn't. But I could have dealt with all of that if he just felt real. A real person struggling with grief. The pieces were all right there and Disney blew it. What can I say? That was their mistake.
What is a man?
Man from Bambi is not a Disney villain. No. Man is not a Disney villain. I am so sick of all these people that think he's a villain. No, he's not. He is an antagonistic force who is not even close to being a villain. I see these people saying, man represents the cruelty and uncaring nature of humanity through his indifference to the natural world. That's nothing! Other Disney villains will wipe out entire civilizations in the pursuit of capitalistic endeavors while also being an actual fucking character in the narrative! I'm not gonna give brownie points to a fucking non-entity within the story just because they committed such a heinous action from Bambi's perspective. That's great and all, but we don't know him! I guess in my Pixar villain ranking, I should have included the Barracuda that killed Marlin's wife and children in Finding Nemo. Oh man, what an evil and nefarious great villain! Hell, he accomplishes more than most of the other Pixar villains. I don't see Lotso, Randall, or Stinky Pete killing anyone and eating their babies. I guess the Barracuda is one of the best Pixar villains of all time. That's what you people fucking sound like. Are you out of your goddamn minds? Man is a suitable, unseen antagonistic force for the purposes of creating drama within the narrative. He functions exactly how he should within the movie, and I didn't need or want him to be an actual character. I just cannot stand the people who say he's one of the greatest Disney villains because, quite frankly, he shouldn't even count for this list. I think at the very least, a Disney villain should have a name and a face. That should be the qualifications. I'll put him this high up as a gesture of goodwill to the fact that he serves his antagonistic purpose perfectly, and thus deserves to rank above the characters I do have significant problems with as villains. But he's not getting any higher because it's time to talk about the real characters now. And he genuinely does not belong in the same category as the rest of them. If you call him one of the greatest villains in cinema one more time, I will lose my fucking marbles. Oh my god. Lilo and Stitch is one of the best Disney movies of all time for so many reasons. Gantu is not one of them. Yeah, he's definitely the weakest part of the movie. I mean, the focus isn't really on the whole Galactic Federation trying to capture Stitch stuff, so he serves his purpose of just being an obstacle in the climax, and it doesn't really matter too much that he doesn't show up before then. But like, I don't know, I just wish he was either more menacing or more funny. If I remember correctly, they leaned more into the funny with the sequels and kind of played up his general incompetence. But here, it's not to the point of hilarity, it's more to the point of asking, why is his cage for Stitch on the outside of the ship, and how did he not have any sensors indicating that Stitch escaped immediately? I don't know, man, he serves his purpose and he has a cool design and voice, but in the context of this original film, he's really not that special.
Medusa?
I said in my Disney movie ranking that Madame Medusa from The Rescuers is just kind of the Walmart-ass version of Cruella de Vil or Madame Mim, and yeah, I literally have nothing else to say about her besides that. I guess her design is pretty good, and sometimes she talks like a Zelda CDI character, which is funny. But oh my god, I was so bored rewatching her scenes. It just feels like they were going through the villainous motions when writing her. Her plan isn't particularly nefarious or memorable. Like, oh, she wants a diamond, wow, that's crazy. And I guess she's gonna use this little girl to retrieve it inside of this small blowhole that leads into a blocked off pirate's cave where the Devil's Eye is located. I just read that off of Wikipedia because I couldn't be bothered to keep rewatching her scenes in this movie. If anything, I like her crocodiles better than her. It's funny that their names are Nero and Brutus, and they have some pretty decent scenes. And to give her some credit, sometimes it's funny how she always just has a big gun. There are good comedic moments where she accidentally shoots stuff. I don't know, that's all I got.
You're a poacher!
Yes, I'm a poacher.
I guess Rescuers villain number 2 was a little bit better than Rescuers villain number 1. What was his name again? Percival C. McLeach. Yeah, I don't know. He's just kind of an evil poacher, and that's about it. He's okay. He serves his purpose as a threat decently well. I think he had one funny line.
I didn't make it all the way through 3rd grade for nothing.
Dude, I don't know. I got nothing else. He's not bad, but he's about as standard as you can possibly get as a Disney villain. Pretty whatever. Let's move on to the ones I have stuff to actually say about.
You received the manhood of a tiger.
Anyone else really wish King Louie was the main villain of the Jungle Book? Like, not only does he have the best song in the movie, but he's just so fun and would make for a great, intimidating antagonist with his massive army of monkeys and desire to evolve. But, you know, I guess Beta Scar works too. Shere Khan is fine enough. They build him up pretty well, and then when you finally meet him, it's surprising how dignified and refined he acts. It's a nice contrast to the whole murderous tiger who wants to eat this child thing. But yeah, I don't know, he doesn't really accomplish that much. Baloo hinders his mobility pretty easily by just grabbing his tail, and then when he actually does have a chance to maul Baloo to death, he can't even do that. Then they tie a flaming branch to his tail and he gets scared and runs away. What a pussy. Cat. Yeah, if you're only gonna be in 10 minutes of a movie, you really gotta leave an impression. And as good as this guy's design and voice are, he's a little bit pathetic. I forget if he was better in the sequel or not, but that doesn't matter. I'm on Team King Louie in terms of the best Jungle Book villain. Hell, even Kaa would have made for a better villain on his own. Society has moved past the need for Shere Khan.
A giant woman!
Oh, right, Moana. I was born for this moment. Time to talk about... Oh yeah, the main villain of this movie is the lava monster. But the villain song, it went to... you know... Curse my own arbitrary rules. Why did I restrict myself to only one villain per movie? I mean, I know why I did it, otherwise we would be here for 15 hours. But no! I banned myself from talking about Tamatoa! My beautiful Tamatoa, no! Okay, fine. What's the lava monster's deal? I mean, it's a little hard to compare her to the others since she mainly is a force of nature. After all, she's just a corrupted version of Tafiti who doesn't even talk. She serves her purpose in the narrative perfectly, and the twist with her is pretty neat. Plus her design is rad, and so is the final battle against her. I don't know if there's anything else to say. She's the lava monster. Not even evil, just heartless. Wait a minute. Heartless? I swear to God, if they don't include a Moana world in Kingdom Hearts 4, that might be the biggest fumble of all time. It's all right there. Plus, that way we can have a Tamatoa boss fight. I really want to talk about Tamatoa in this video. I mean, for God's sakes, it's not like I have an hour-and-a-half long video talking about him or anything. I don't know. I'll let you guys know where Tamatoa ranks. When we get to the spot I would actually put him at, just for funsies. Alright, I think it's about time we hear from our sponsor. And by hear from our sponsor, I obviously mean time for the next installment in the Shaperless Sandwich 6, baby! The ongoing New York Times best-selling, Pulitzer Prize-winning story arc about me getting ingredients to make a sandwich. Last time I acquired ketchup as it poured out of Shinjiro Persona 3's coat after he laid down from getting shot. Next, I don't know. I think the sandwich could use some pizzazz. Just some sort of ultra cool, secret, special ingredient of some kind. Oh, did you say ultra cool, secret, special ingredient? Why, hello, random old lady. Why, yes, I did say ultra cool, secret, special ingredient. Do you have one? Oh, of course, dearie. How about this sick-ass apple? It's got a real kick to it. It's to die for. I poisoned it and it'll kill you if you eat it. Huh? Sorry lady, did you say something? I wasn't listening. I was helping this lovely gentleman make a website so he can spread his turbotastic joy to every corner of the internet. His words, not mine. What? Don't you want to ask me how you can build an amazing website? What's a website? With Squarespace, the sponsor of today's video. Squarespace is an amazing online website builder that enables you to create beautiful websites for your business or personal hobby. You can utilize their new design intelligence features to build an amazing, more personalized website tailored to your unique needs, allowing you to create your own digital identity you can use across your entire online presence. Squarespace makes it easy to sell all sorts of things like online courses, blogs, videos, and memberships. Put your content behind a paywall to get recurring revenue. Simply set the price and choose whether to charge a one-time fee or subscription for access. Plus, you can easily manage all your payments in one place with Squarespace Payments. It's super quick and easy. You can get started in just a few clicks and start receiving payments right away. Your customers can use tons of popular payment methods like Klarna, ACH Direct Debit in the US, Apple Pay, Afterpay in the US and Canada, and ClearPay in the UK. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/jfrillis to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Okay, that was nice, dearie. Just take the apple already. Thanks! Well, that was fun. See you guys for the next installment. It's a top secret video that I'm keeping the subject of under wraps. And thus, you'll just have to watch it to find out what the next sandwich ingredient is. Also, I haven't written what it is yet, so I'm not sure. But that's beside the point. I'm building suspense and mystery, damn it. The Schaefrillis Sandwich 6. Yippee! Back to the ranking now.
Now there's someone who could have used a good mother.
Okay, so like, I know I'm only supposed to talk about the villains here and not the movies they came from as much, but oh my god, I forgot how awful Cinderella's pacing is. We waste so much time dicking around with the mice that outside of her silent appearance in the prologue, Lady Tremaine doesn't properly show up in the film until the 22-minute mark. Ridiculous movie. Ah yeah, she's fine by the way. Much like the movie itself, I'm not a huge fan of her, but she definitely does what she's supposed to. You hate her for making Cinderella's life miserable for no real reason, and that dress scene is obviously really cruel. But aside from that, she's just not all that interesting an antagonist. Functional but forgettable is how I describe her. Oh, and to be fully transparent, yeah, she would have ranked a lot higher if I consider the events of the direct-to-DVD sequels. Cause she's way more sinister and cool in Cinderella 3, when she gets the fairy godmother's wand. I know, I should just accept that the relatively grounded Cinderella 1 has a relatively grounded villain. But there are plenty of other villains who don't have any magic powers or abilities who manage to be way more memorable and delightfully evil. I just don't think Lady Tremaine does it for me, unfortunately. Not bad, fine for what she is, but she's not ranking any higher, you kidding?
Stupid monkey.
Clayton is kinda like if Man from Bambi was an actual character. He's okay. I don't really think he's anyone's favorite part of Tarzan. He serves his role as an asshole poacher well enough, but nothing about him really sticks out or leaves that much of an impression. It's like, the only thing that really makes him intimidating is that he wields a gun. But take away that neutral special and there's not that much to him. He wants to catch gorillas to get money, and he's not particularly funny or menacing until the final act. He does make for a decently intimidating presence there, even managing to kill Kerchak, which is good because it establishes him as a legitimate threat, and also because f*** Kerchak, I hate that stupid monkey. I really like the scene where Tarzan has him at gunpoint, and he just says, "Go ahead, shoot me." Even in a life or death scenario, he acts cocky and tries to gain the mental upper hand on Tarzan. But I saw him flinch when Tarzan pretended to fire the gun. Ooh, he was caught in 4K, acting like a little bitch. Clayton's design isn't half bad either, but mainly, he gets a ton of points for having one of the sickest death scenes out of any Disney villain. Like, can you imagine them getting away with this today? I genuinely can't. That's nuts. Yeah, I mean, he's one of those villains who works well enough for his movie. I just don't think anyone is gonna let him pop up on their all-time greatest Disney villains list. Sorry, buddy, you're not ranking any higher, but if you want, you can still hang around. Ooh, too soon.
Carrying a big old envelope full of money? Gonna give it to Mr. Sykes.
Sykes is pretty boring from a motivation and relation to the protagonist standpoint, and he doesn't really show up in Oliver and Company enough to make a huge impression, but at least when he is around, he's pretty cool. The way he's animated is sick as hell. Very slow, very deliberate. I love the way he gets cigar smoke in people's faces. It's just undoubtedly rad to have a mafia boss as the main villain of a Disney movie. He's pretty decent at being intimidating, and I love what a lunatic he becomes in the climax. What with him driving his car down a subway system. That's probably a bad idea because there are trains down there and he might, yeah, that's exactly what I expected to happen. Undoubtedly more of a vibes villain than an actually effective villain story-wise, but the vibes are solid enough to make him, I don't know, ever so slightly above average. I mean, hey, for a character in fucking Oliver and Company, that's pretty impressive.
I can put a spell on you when you're done for.
Well, I mean, Madam Mim is the closest thing the Sword in the Stone has to a villain, even though she only shows up for 10 minutes at the very end. It's kind of like if Tamatoa had to carry the entirety of Moana on his back, villain-wise. Except she's not quite as base as Tamatoa, so she doesn't rank very high. I mean, she's really fun when she does appear, hating sunshine and everything positive and all that, engaging in this really cool wizard battle, which is pretty much the only scene in the movie worth a damn. I don't like the Sword in the Stone. Madam Mim is definitely an enjoyable presence when she's around, and I could certainly see her serving as a great main villain to a story that actually focused on her, but it's a little hard to rank her any higher than this, since she isn't really that integral to her movie. Fun character, but I needed more.
I've got it. Piss!
Pinocchio is a bit of a weird one because it doesn't really have a primary villain, more of a rotating ensemble of villains since it's a pretty episodic film. You could make a case that the main villain is the Coachman, or the Whale, or Stromboli, but I don't know, the more I thought about it, I think it's probably Honest John and Gideon. They're the ones who really tempt Pinocchio and lead him astray. Plus, they do so twice instead of every other villain, who really only gets one sequence to themselves. Yeah, the Coachman is probably more evil since he runs a sick, disturbing, turning little boys into donkeys island. But I still think Honest John is the one I gotta rank for this list. Yeah, he's pretty good. Just a funny sly fox who has great rapport and slapstick with his silent sidekick Gideon. I like the part where he pretends to be a doctor and just spouts random gibberish to convince Pinocchio to go to Pleasure Island. I like the part where he says an actor's life is gay. Overall, he's a pretty good and enjoyable villain. Not in the movie too much, but neither is any other villain in this movie.
Because you're gonna yodel, obey me.
You know, maybe if Home on the Range was about the epic yodeling villain and not the Roseanne cow, it would have been good. I actually can't believe how much I genuinely enjoy Alameda Slim. Like, it's always nice when a pretty solid villain comes out of a bad movie. His evil plan is so bonkers, but so deliciously effective. He uses his magical yodeling abilities to hypnotize cows and steal them away from farms, which then go out of business. So he dons his Baron disguise and buys them up with the money he got from selling their stolen cows. And his motivation to do all this is because he kept getting fired from a ton of farms because they didn't like his yodeling. I just... That's so funny. I like him, I'm sorry. His design is good, he has some funny lines. His villain song is so weirdly catchy and memorable. Like, you really gotta understand, this movie is complete dog shit, but he is just... I don't know, man, I like him. Even though taking him down is the main goal of the cow trio the movie is unfortunately centered on, he doesn't appear in it nearly as much as I would have liked. But for the parts he is in the movie, I had a ton of fun with him, if you can believe that. Also, according to the Disney Wiki and this one deleted scene, apparently his original scheme was to storm Washington, D.C. with an army of hypnotized cows in an attempt to become president. This man was going to commit January 6th with a bunch of cows. Are you kidding me? Apparently this plotline was cut for being too ridiculous. Like, oh, this guy yodeling in order to hypnotize cows was totally fine. But using said hypnotized cows to storm the Capitol and forcibly make him president? No, that's where we draw the line. It really is a shame because this plot development would have made Home on the Range a lot more interesting and memorable. Like, it's almost going back in time to the first Thanksgiving to get turkeys off the menu levels of insane. Not quite, but it's in the same ballpark.
Now all of
Twitter
knows you're
horny.
You know, it's weird that Shan Yu was more progressive than the heroes when it came to women in the military. When Mulan reveals herself to him, he recognizes her as the soldier from the mountains and doesn't even bring up or show any surprise at the fact that she's a woman. We love a progressive, ruthless, evil warlord in this house. I was ready to rank him a little lower overall, but honestly, he's a great example of doing a lot with a little. He barely shows up in the movie, but every scene with him wastes no time in terms of demonstrating how pure evil he is through some clever and sinister lines.
How many men does it take to deliver a message? One. The little girl will be missing her doll. We should return it to her.
Oh, well that's nice. Oh, never mind. Honestly, the scene where they find the destroyed village is probably his best and most terrifying moment as a villain. And he's not even present for it. This is just the aftermath. But it's so damn dark and intense. You always take him seriously as a threat, even in his honestly pretty fitting dry comedic moments.
Boo.
I don't know why that works, but it just does. I don't think I'm gonna rank him higher, because I generally do like when villains have relationships with the heroes, and this guy doesn't even formally meet Mulan until the very end. But to be fair, he's a different kind of villain. Less of a character to an extent, and more of a force of nature the heroes have to prevent from taking over China. But nonetheless still with a lot of memorable lines, a great design, and a consistently intimidating presence that absolutely services exactly what the film needs. Pretty good villain, all things considered. The Queen of Hearts doesn't appear that much. Alice in Wonderland is one of those rotating cast sort of movies after all. But once she does come in the final act, she's an absolute blast. I love seeing all of her subjects bend over backwards to appease her, which includes the most absurdly rigged game of croquet I've ever seen in my life. And the kangaroo court she puts on in order to sentence Alice to death is ridiculously fun too. Man, it's just nice to get a villain in a Disney movie whose main characteristic is she loves chopping off people's heads. Why can't we have more of that kind of villain again? Yeah, there's really not too much to say about her. I kinda wish she was in the movie more, but I also love how this movie never overuses any one of the zany characters we meet. And the Queen of Hearts makes an incredible impression despite her limited screen time. Funny, well animated, expressive, she's got it all.
Slade.
Amos Slade is a good villain who becomes a great one based on one non-villainous choice he makes at the end. One simple action that gives him so much more depth than he otherwise would have had. He's pretty simple for most of the movie, just an asshole hunter who constantly wants to kill poor Todd the fox, and who ends up breaking an unlikely friendship between Todd and Copper by training Copper to be a hunting dog. Yeah, he had no way of knowing these two were forming an interspecies friendship, but it's still heartbreaking to see his ruthless hunting characteristics manifest in Copper, thus forming a rift between the fox and the hound, parentheses 1981. It's also frankly insane just how intent he is on killing this one fox, instead of just letting it go and moving on. Seriously, why can't he just grow up and get over it? Oh, that's what he does at the end when Copper stands between the barrel of his gun and Todd. You know what? I gotta give him credit. This one display of basic humanity has really stuck out in my mind for years since I first watched this movie. It's a believable conclusion for him to come to. The idea that there's no need for further bloodshed, and that he was just being obsessive and ridiculous. I think the ending, where Big Mama's patching up his leg, is genuinely sweet, showing that they've put aside their differences after all this conflict. I don't know, man. I know it seems a little hard to justify a villain ceasing to be evil as a reason why I like him so much, but this just felt like a story where a redemption arc was appropriate and believably executed. He's just a really good character from a pretty good film in general. And speaking of redeemed villains,
If you had to choose between Jim and all the money I have in my pocket.
I wasn't really sure whether to include John Silver at first, because he's a very different type of villain. The redeemable one. And not just at the very end either, like Amos Slade. The whole movie is about him displaying his surprising humanity, and showing how his love for Jim is what's causing him to stray away from his nefarious, single-minded goal of getting the treasure. It's an amazing arc, and he's an amazing character. But I didn't want that to sway where he ended up on the list too much. I figured it would be better to mainly judge how he functions as a villain. And he's a pretty damn good one. His voice is great, his design is incredible with all these little cyborg bits and bops. He can be pretty damn menacing in a ton of scenes, yet he never loses that undeniable charisma. Of course, the best aspects of his character are his arc where he grows a softer side and ultimately sacrifices the treasure in order to save Jim. There's a lot of great little moments where the two sides of him intersect. Like I love when Jim forces him to take him to the treasure or else he'll withhold the map. And you can see in his face just how proud he is of Jim for thinking so cleverly, before he turns it off and goes back into villain mode. There's such a great balance to his character, which is precisely what makes the moment where he saves Jim so unbelievably satisfying. Definitely a much better character in general than he is a villain, but he is a great villain too, so, you know.
Welcome to hell!
I love Dr. Facilier. We all do. But it's okay to admit that he's a style over substance villain, right? I mean, the guy doesn't really do anything after turning Naveen into a frog. Like, he didn't even turn Tiana into a frog. That was just an accident. He's kinda absent throughout the entire middle chunk of the story, only appearing in 1 or 2 scenes that don't even connect to the protagonists and what they're doing. He just sends his shadow henchmen out and sits at home dicking around with Lawrence while they do his bidding so he can make his needlessly complicated plan work. I don't know, when your most evil action is stepping on a bug, maybe that's a sign you're not exactly a top tier villain. But with that said, oh my god, he's so cool anyway, it doesn't even really matter. He just feels like a top tier villain when you're watching him actually in action. From his killer iconic villain song, Friends on the Other Side, to the sick as hell way he's animated, to the impeccably sinister and suave vocal delivery of Keith David. Dude, Keith David's voice makes me perk up anytime I hear it. He's one of those actors that makes me say, holy shit, you're in this? Alright, I'm sold. Facilier brings us so many vibrant voodoo visuals, and he looks and sounds damn cool while doing it. I wish he had a more active role in the story, though to be fair, I kind of wish the story of this movie in general was completely different, because I think it takes a bit of a nosedive after Tiana becomes a frog. But regardless, there are still plenty of flashes of brilliance exhibited by Facilier, even after Friends on the Other Side is over. I think you can best see that in his scene with Tiana towards the end, tempting her with the dream of her restaurant fulfilled, even going so far as to say she's almost there. That is so sick, using the I Want song to manipulate her. Oh my god, it's even cooler than when Slade did it in Teen Titans Go to the Movies. You know, in the final battle when he says to Robin, "It would be so awesome. It would be so cool." Okay, actually, never mind. That's cooler than Facilier doing it. Sorry, I don't make the rules. This scene really makes me long for more interactions between Facilier and Tiana throughout the rest of the movie. Like, they literally meet for the first time here, and it deflates a little bit of the weight of this interaction as a result. Like, how does he know all this information about her and her desires? I guess the spooky Friends on the Other Side told him or whatever. Oh well, it's a fantastic scene. One where you almost buy into the snake oil he's selling because of how damn charismatic he is. Fuck, he's so good. His death scene is really sick as well. Just overall a fantastic character who I really wish served as a better villain in his movie. I think he's one of the most fumbled and underused Disney villains without a doubt. I can't feasibly rank him higher, but also if you said he was your favorite Disney villain, I couldn't even argue with you honestly.
She's not even that hot!
And she's fine. She's prettier than you.
The Evil Queen is a great example of how you can do a lot with a little. Her motivation is so simple, almost comically so. She just wants to be fairest in the land. But the idea that there's one girl prettier than her makes her go completely batshit crazy. It's a basic motivation for a simplistic character. But by God, that's all you need. She's the perfect mixture of extremely petty and genuinely sinister. I love how right at the start, the magic mirror says, "Alas, she is more fair than thee." And the queen's response is, "Alas for her." Honestly, slay. Did I use that right? I don't know. Her movements and facial expressions are so delightfully extra, as is her sick as hell cape. But the main appeal of this villain is just how elaborate the lengths she'll go to are to solve a complete non-issue. This is vanity and self-absorption at its most absolutely comical. Like, she can't handle being the second prettiest girl in the land, so she'll make a potion to turn herself super ugly as a disguise in order to visit Snow White and kill her with a poison apple. I said this before, but like, couldn't you have just tricked Snow White into drinking the potion and turning ugly herself? I don't know, maybe there was some lore I missed that would have prevented that from working. But to me, it's a great expression of how narrow-minded her focus is. For some villains, that could be seen as a negative, but for her, it's a boon. Snow White is a simple movie, and the titular character is basically a manifestation of all the goodness and purity there is in the world. So likewise, the villain should be made to represent absolute, irredeemable, pure evil and vanity, which is what the Evil Queen delivers in spades. She just revels in her evilness, especially post-disguise. When she encounters a skeleton in her torture dungeon, reaching for a pitcher of water, this is her response. Like, I hate to say it, but they just don't make them like that anymore. Evil for the love of the game. Just an absolute delight and easily the highlight of this movie.
You suck your thumb?
Oh man, I forgot how good Robin Hood is. And one of its best attributes is its villain, the rascally, phony King of England, Prince John. Why did he have to be named John when we already have Little John? Are there any other fucking names in medieval times? Prince John is undoubtedly one of the funniest Disney villains. So many of the exchanges between him and his little gay snake partner crack me up. I also just love the face he makes when he starts crying about his mommy and sucking his thumb. I don't know, man, that just kills me every time. And not only does he steal every scene he's in with his hilariously petty and childish antics, but he manages to be a grave and imposing threat on the citizens, despite not being threatening himself in the slightest. That's what happens when you give a complete fucking moron power. So even though he's stupid, he's the king and he can just tax the hell out of everyone, sending whoever doesn't comply to jail, and even threatening to have characters killed on multiple multiple occasions. He's rotten to the core and a legitimate threat that Robin Hood needs to contend with. And yet, he's also a hilarious, pathetic drama queen you just never get tired of seeing. He's great. One of the most underrated Disney villains for sure.
We usually prefer the ones who've been locked away in a tower.
Mother Gothel is just a grade A manipulative bitch. Constantly gaslighting Rapunzel about everything, insulting her to her face, and then immediately saying, "Oh, it's just a joke. Don't take it too serious." Ooh, I hate her. She really is maddeningly despicable. And she knows exactly how to get Rapunzel to do what she wants. She could have had the Stabbington brothers just kill Eugene while they're sleeping, then knock them out and convince Rapunzel to come home, exactly how she does later on. But no, man. The puppeteer has a way bigger plan than that. She makes sure the stage is set so it looks like Eugene ran off with the crown and betrayed Rapunzel. Then she disposes of the brothers she manipulated and continues her mental hold on her. Really damn evil. I do have to kind of question what the long-term plan was, though. What was she gonna do when Rapunzel became an adult? What happens if Rapunzel gets older than her? What is she even doing with all this eternal youth? I don't know, man. I guess that's not really important. She also could have just lied about Rapunzel's birthday, and then she wouldn't think the lights were meant for her. But oh well, that's not important either. A few other things to hold her back is, yeah, I've never been a big fan of the villain song. It might be the lamest Disney villain song. Well, no, never mind. I know the first version is supposed to sound cheerful and pleasant, despite the twisted lyrics, but the reprise that's meant to sound super evil still isn't catchy or memorable to me. It's just not a favorite. And in general, she does kind of overlap with a certain other Disney villain who gaslights the protagonist into staying locked away. And if you know which villain I'm talking about, then you probably know it's not a favorable comparison between the two. But I don't want to be too dismissive. Gothel is great. I wouldn't personally put her up there as one of my all-time favorites, but she still serves her story incredibly well.
I only wish to have a coat made out of topping.
Cruella de Vil, Cruella de Vil. You know you're a great villain when someone writes an entire hit diss track about you just based on your bad vibes. Like, Roger didn't even know she wanted to murder the Dalmatians and make them into a fur coat when he wrote the song. He did it just because she's generally a bitch. Which, yeah, I love her attitude and how much better than everyone else she presents herself as. She's super funny and she has one of the most iconic designs out of any Disney villain. I mean, she is one of the most iconic Disney villains too. Like, not a single other one has 2 live-action adaptation sub-series about them. And it's easy to see why. How deranged do you have to be to casually talk about all the potential ways to murder puppies just for the sake of getting a fur coat out of them? They're puppies! Like, hello? Really, that's pretty much all Cruella boils down to as a villain. Her goal is killing puppies, and her motivation is coats. That's really all you need to be one of the most despicable, and yet one of the most entertaining Disney villains of all time. I probably have her ranked a little lower than some might expect, but I do think this is rather appropriate. She might be the most insane Disney villain, but others are funnier and others are more evil, if you can believe that. She also sends Jasper and Horace out to do a lot of her dirty work, which is great and all, because I love the banter she has with them. But maybe if she did some more things herself, she would leave an even stronger impression. Not to say she doesn't though, because come on, everyone knows and loves to despise her.
Pull the lever, Kronk.
That's the light switch!
Yzma is just an undeniable blast of a villain. A lot of her appeal does come from her amazing chemistry with Kronk, who I'm obviously not going to be ranking here because he's not a bad guy. He just wanted to talk to squirrels and eat spinach puffs. Yzma is pure evil though. Cutthroat and maniacal through and through. We get a great sense of that even before she develops a gleeful murder plot to kill Kuzco and take over the Empire. Just that opening scene with the peasants says it all.
Just don't starve idiots!
I also really like the exchange she has with Kronk about how Kuzco didn't turn out better considering she practically raised him. That really says a lot about her with just one joke. She's one of those evil and she loves it villains, with way too many darkly comedic moments and line deliveries to count. The animators really do some stellar work on her as well. I love the scene where she and Kronk are locked in the closet and you get such vivid expressions from just her eyes. Yeah, man, she is excellent. Definitely very well liked, but not necessarily talked about as one of the great Disney villains, tragically. Maybe that's because she does have to share the spotlight with Kronk, a somewhat more popular character. But it also might be because Emperor's New Groove is more comedic in general, and it's hard to take her seriously as a threat when the movie is just entirely a screwball comedy. I'll admit that does play a bit of a part in keeping her from ranking higher, but I don't think that should devalue just how incredible of a job the team did bringing this villain to life. The writing, animation, and Eartha Kitt's stellar vocal performance all come together to make an amazing, goofily sinister villain for the ages. And have you heard her cut song Snuff Out the Light? It's so damn good. Yeah, it has absolutely no place in the finished movie since it's a holdover from when Yzma's motivation was entirely different. But I really like it, so there. Just thought I should bring up the fact that you could be listening to Peak right now.
We now return to Bad Boys 2, Return of Jafar.
Jafar is a weird one for me in the sense that I think he's just kind of fine for most of the movie. And then in the final act, when he actually gets the genie's power, he's suddenly kind of the best villain ever. As a result, it was a little hard to figure out where to rank him. I mean, he's never bad. I like his design and his weird upper lip, plus his banter with Iago is top notch. But yeah, he doesn't really accomplish too much for most of the movie. He loses the lamp to a monkey. Aladdin figures out he's a fucking sorcerer pretty easily. And he's not exactly cool or charismatic enough to make up for the fact that he doesn't accomplish much like Facilier is. But everything changes from the moment he becomes the genie's new master. Turns out he was really holding out on us, cause his evilness is so uniquely gleeful and delicious from here on out. It was well worth the wait. Prince Ali reprise is killer. That high note at the end is what really lets you know, oh, he's lost his fucking marbles. In the final battle, the damn puns that precede every magic attack, oh my god, simply incredible. And of course, you don't get much more demented than wanting the young princess to fall in love with you. Like, I thought he was just marrying her to be sultan. But no, this twisted bitch is actually into her. Oh my god, make it stop. For a villain who seems to be rather played out and standard for a majority of the film, he really explodes with all this pent-up villainy, making for one of the absolute best and most exciting third acts in Disney history. And on top of all that, I love how Aladdin can't physically defeat him and instead outwits him. But not in a way where like, oh, Jafar, you're such an idiot for not seeing that coming. Nah, I think it's reasonable for him to not immediately realize he'll be confined to a lamp, especially with how power mad he's gone. It makes a lot of sense, and it's a great way for such a street smart character to get a leg up on him. So I mean, yeah, I couldn't just deny Jafar a spot this high, considering all he accomplishes in such a short amount of time. I also really like the part where he needed glasses. That was kind of funny.
I win. I win.
Much like the movie it came from, Rourke has got to be one of the most underrated Disney villains. I mean, on the surface, he's nothing too crazy, just an asshole who wants to get rich. But like, they really went all out with making him feel as true to life as possible. Having him call himself an adventure capitalist, hearing that taking the treasure of Atlantis away will cause the people to die out, and immediately thinking they should triple the asking price for it as a result, and later using social Darwinism to try and justify this. Yeah, that's not the sort of thing Disney would put in any of their movies nowadays. Rourke is just a new level of despicable that a lot of Disney villains could never really achieve. And it's especially heinous that he's just so casual about it the entire time. This is nothing more than business to him. Just a job he can get rich off of without thinking about the fact that he's leaving an entire civilization to die. You can hear it in his voice. It's never overly sinister. He just sounds so normal the entire movie.
Maybe I'm not being clear. I'd suggest you put a bandage on that bleeding heart of yours. It doesn't suit a mercenary.
Because that's what he thinks getting rich off the deaths of these indigenous people is. Normal. Deeply, unsettlingly horrific. And he works as a twist villain because he's more than just a gotcha moment like Hans or Bellwether is. Hell, the movie isn't exactly trying to hide that he's the big bad. He and Helga have a conversation in the middle about the fact that there are people living here changing nothing. It's not a crazy unexpected reveal, but what is unexpected is the sheer callousness this guy displays. I can't stop thinking about his one line where he thinks he's gotten away with it.
I love it when I win.
That's like not an evil mastermind thing to say. If any other villain said that, it would be pretty lame. But I think its mundaneness suits this villain to a T. He's finished another job to get rich, and that's that. Everyone he just doomed to extinction is out of sight and out of mind now. inconceivably evil by the standards of Disney villains. There are some that are more entertaining, who get to be evil throughout their movies more. But I can't deny this guy deserves to be in the conversation as one of the best ones.
I can't wait to kill this baby.
Tragically, you guys, I do think Maleficent is a little overrated. In the sense that I just think she's an amazing villain, and not the greatest villain in animation history. I mean, on some level, I kinda do get the hype. Aside from Chernabog, who just appeared in a short snippet of a movie, she was kinda the first ever depiction of evil incarnate that Disney ever put in one of their movies. She lives up to the moniker of Mistress of All Evil and then some, sporting a killer design, chilling voice, and some awe-inspiring magical abilities. I love the fact that her entire motivation for cursing Aurora is just not getting invited to her party. Evil for the love of the game. What an absolute delight. She's not really in the movie too much, but she has such a commanding presence when she is, and the shadow of her curse looms over all of it. Everything also comes together so well in the climax, with her evoking all the powers of hell! That's such a great line, oh my god. And turning into a dragon, oh jeez, oh man, what an iconic, menacing, fantastic villain. Yeah, sorry I didn't rank her higher though. As great as Maleficent is, and as much as she really set the standard for Disney villains going forward, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't better and more interesting ones in the future. It's hard to match her level of supreme evil, but the ones I ranked higher all have something that makes them stand out to me more. Either being funnier, appearing throughout the movie more often, or being evil in more true-to-life ways. She's great though, I still love her. But I don't know man, saying she's the best Disney villain is like saying Link to the Past is the best Zelda game. At some point, you really gotta actually open your eyes to what came after.
Everybody hates me!
No, little dude!
For the purposes of this list, I wasn't sure if I should count Bowler Hat Guy, the main villain of Meet the Robinsons, as the main villain of Meet the Robinsons. Cause he's kinda being manipulated the whole time by the nefarious Doris, who is revealed to be the true mastermind in the final act. Doris narrowly won the Twitter poll, but a lot of people brought up that the two of them are kind of a package deal. It's like Oily TC said. Look, just because Ganon shows up at the end of Twilight Princess and reveals he was the true secret evil baddie, doesn't mean Zant isn't the primary villain of that game. Yeah, it's only fair to count the duo for the purposes of this list. They're both working towards the same nefarious goal for the majority of the movie, regardless of Doris's aims being a little bigger. Unsurprisingly, they're an amazing duo. Bowler Hat Guy is easily one of the funniest villains, with a genuinely sad motivation about how he refuses to move on from the past. An incident he blamed Lewis for that he thought ruined his entire life, even though everyone had long forgotten about it. That "they all hated me" scene is so funny but so sad, man. Seeing him encourage his past self to not let it go and move on is so funny but so sad. It's upsetting to see him consumed by the pettiest of grudges, only for him to become a legitimate threat thanks to Doris's clever time-traveling ploy. And I especially love the contrast between Doris's ultra competence and Bowler Hat Guy's impressive capability to fuck even the simplest of tasks up. Honestly, even though Meet the Robinsons is far from a perfect movie, the more I think about it, the more I realize I kinda don't have any problems with Bowler Hat Guy as a villain. Like, I'm sorry if he's ranked too high for your liking, but really now, try and tell me that he isn't peak. The scene where he explains his backstory to Lewis is incredibly captivating. He serves as one of the best foils to a protagonist in any Disney movie, and I still can't get that scene where Lewis finds his notebook with nothing but a question mark in it out of my head. It's rare for a Disney movie to treat its villain this sympathetically without outright redeeming them. But I'm sure Lewis righting the wrong of keeping Goob up at night will lead the boy to have a much better future. And I don't want to neglect Doris either. That bad future that she takes over freaked the hell out of me as a kid. It's clever, underhanded, and really strengthens the duo as a threat in general. I really didn't expect them to rank so high going into this, but I'm sorry, I just adore them. The standout characters of their movie by a long shot.
The Candyman.
Ever wonder what it would be like if the Mad Hatter was a fascist? Well, here you go. King Candy is often regarded as the last good Disney villain. I'm writing this before I've seen Moana 2, but I have a sneaking suspicion that will remain true for the foreseeable future. Maybe I'm wrong, I guess we'll all know when this video is out. But yeah, as much as he is definitely well regarded as a villain, I feel like we all kind of generally underestimate how good he is when stacked up against the other Disney villains. I mean, he's diabolical. Taking over an entire game, ripping away Vanellope's entire life and everyone else's memories, and setting up this candy-coated cast system where you can only join the game's playable roster for a day if you have a coin to enter the race with, thus disenfranchising the people who don't have coins and thus can't join the races. It's an insane system that everyone just goes along with because, you know, the king said so. The king who stole all of our memories and overthrew the natural order of this game because, well, his own game is gone. His petty jealousy and attempts to take over a different game that stole people's attention away saw to that. Yeah, the twist that he's the infamous Turbo is really well done. And like a lot of other people have said, the reason this works so well as a twist is because this isn't where we first get to see him being evil. He was already incredibly villainous as King Candy the whole time, with the Turbo reveal just being the cherry on top, enhancing the sheer insanity of this character's evil deeds. But even before that, he's an amazing villain. He's kooky and funny and definitely entertaining to watch, for one. But these are all a part of his master manipulation tactics. Honestly, he's one of the best manipulators out of any of the Disney villains. And you can clearly see that when he convinces Ralph that Vanellope shouldn't race. This scene is so good because, damn it, you actually believe him. It sounds like a reasonable explanation, and you don't blame Ralph for falling for it. It's great too from an audience perspective because you genuinely start to wonder if maybe you judge this guy too harshly. Until you remember that one odd shot of the code room where Vanellope's bit of code lies ripped away. And it all starts to make sense. Ooh, what a grade A, pure evil fiend. And he just gets more intimidating when the mask is finally ripped away in both the final race and the Cybug boss level. Hearing a guy who acted so gleeful and bubbly the whole movie say in that same intonation, "Let's watch her die together," just really works. I don't think he gets nearly enough credit for being an absolute top tier Disney villain. Funny, slimy, and shockingly nefarious. I think he's more than earned a spot this high on the list.
We're the Rats.
The fact that we live in a society where Ratigan is not constantly hyped up as one of the greatest Disney villains of all time deeply upsets me. Holy shit, I love everything about this guy. From the amazing animation we witness as his face contorts into increasingly insane expressions, to Vincent Price's deliciously devious delivery. The way this guy talks is just so good. Every single line of his oozes with charismatic malice, even the childish and petty ones. His utter contempt for Basil is truly a sight to behold. And as funny as it is when he overreacts to one of his henchmen calling him a rat, it's somehow even funnier when Basil does it and he just fucking stares at him with a grin frozen onto his face. Dude, that just took me out. So many things this villain does take me out. I mean, good lord, his evil plan is to force a guy to build a robot replica of the queen, who then appoints him to a position of power so he can tax the elderly, the infirm, and little children. Oh, but the people making Home on the Range thought it was too ridiculous to have a guy storm Washington, D.C. with a bunch of cows in order to become president. Cowards! Ratigan is just dripping with some of the most gleeful and whimsical evil ever concocted at Walt Disney Animation Studios. I was watching this movie and thinking, his villain song is so fun. And then I noticed that one of the lyrics was his henchman singing, "Worse than the widows and orphans you drowned." Excuse me? I'm sorry, do they just casually throw the fact that he's drowned widows and orphans into a lively and cheerful song celebrating how good he is at pulling heists? Are we just gonna gloss over that? I mean, that's Ratigan for you, I guess. Incredibly sinister and frightening, but damn is he having such a good time being evil that you can't help but have a good time too. I said this in the movie ranking video and I'll say it again. What other villain would create an elaborate Rube Goldberg machine in order to kill his arch rival that's set to go off only after a personalized diss track he wrote and recorded for him stops playing? That is next level pettiness and delicious evil. And just when you think you've seen it all with this guy, he just completely succumbs to his rage at his plan having been foiled and turns into this frightening, monstrous beast during the climax. He really hits every possible villainous beat you could ever ask for. Murderous lunatic and petty gay asshole. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but that's all I could ever want in a villain. Top-notch stuff. I really only wish he had more screen time, and that in general, a movie this good was longer. Watch The Great Mouse Detective already. I am no longer asking.
See, I promised myself Taco Bell.
Gosh, it disturbs me to see you, Gaston. That's the end of that sentence. You know Gaston is really great. Easily one of the funniest Disney villains. Hell, funniest Disney characters in general. But underneath all that charisma and humor that comes from his general stupidity, he kind of quietly and unexpectedly becomes rather sinister right under our noses. He starts out as just a goofy nuisance, pining for Belle and not getting anywhere in that regard. And there are a lot of great bits with him during the first half. Like, one really underrated one is the fact that he set up the entire wedding with Belle before he even proposed to her. A really delightful expression of his pure ego. This is another little thing, but I just love the hole in his sock exposing his big toe. I don't know why that's so funny to me. Beneath his handsome exterior, he really is just a huge brute. It's great how the first ever action he takes in the entire film is killing something. I like how he's integrated into the opening song very naturally. And oh my god, the song named after him is such a supreme banger. Too many good bits in this one to count. The 4 dozen eggs, the smacking the chess set away, the barge! He serves as just really strong comedic relief that's mostly disconnected from the main plotline, until he starts to intersect with it towards the very end. And it becomes evident that, oh, his behavior and general attitude towards Belle shouldn't be funny. It's actually kind of alarming. His charisma can be weaponized to lead an entire town into battle against this harmless beast. It's legitimately dangerous for someone like Gaston to have this level of influence over a group of people. And he's actually pretty damn sinister in the final battle as he taunts Beast and basically does murder him. Like, if it wasn't for the magic spell reversal coming with free healing, Gaston would have won. You know, besides the fact that he fell off. I also love how he's just so cowardly and sniveling when he's grabbed by the beast, then given a chance to leave, and instead he backstabs the guy who let him off the hook. Yeah, his death is pretty well deserved here. Overall, an amazing villain. One that you don't really get the full evil picture of until that last act. But it's well built up to and makes perfect sense within the narrative. It's crazy to think that all he wanted this whole time was some Taco Bell. Like, come on, dude, there were way less nefarious ways of getting that. Just like with the ranking I made of every Disney animation movie, you can probably tell from the way this villain list turned out that I generally don't care for the older Disney films as much as the Renaissance or even some 2000s films. There's a lot of good stuff pre-Little Mermaid, but Little Mermaid onward is where Disney really started pumping out the genuine masterpieces, which also happen to have some of their best villains. I wasn't really sure if any classic baddies would make their way this high, and I was especially convinced after Cruella and Maleficent didn't quite land there for me. Yeah, so I completely forgot about a certain amazing someone who I legitimately can't find anything wrong with. Give it up for my favorite old-timey Disney villain, Captain Hook. This guy basically runs the entire gambit of what you can do with a villain. Aside from being an interesting / tragic character, but you know, we didn't really need that from him. He's hysterical, providing us with some of the absolute best slapstick out of any Disney film. On top of a great rapport with Shmi and countless other killer bits. One of the first things he does is shoot a member of his crew who's playing the accordion too loud. Like, he murdered that man. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it's played as a joke, and the movie just moves on from it entirely. God, I miss the days when a Disney villain could just do that. It's also really rare and cool to get a villain with this much beef in history with the hero. Like, Peter already cut his hand off and fed it to a crocodile way before the events of the film, so we get to be thrown right in the middle of their rivalry, which is a novel change of pace. I love it. It allows their relationship to be so well defined and fun to watch as they try and one-up each other. I talked about it before, but I adore the fact that he promises Tinkerbell he won't lay hand nor hook on Peter Pan, and instead of just doing the boring thing and going back on that promise, he keeps it and instead mails Peter Pan a pipe bomb. Deranged, hilarious, and incredible all at once. If it wasn't for Tinkerbell warning Peter, Hook actually would have fucking bombed this child to death. That's so good. He's actually fairly clever and capable, serving as a legit threat to the protagonists. And yet he manages to be so entertainingly pathetic and goofy at the same time. It's a really tough balancing act to get right, but he absolutely nails it. Just a complete scene stealer who dominates every moment he's on screen. And so does Shmi, and so does that damn crocodile. Oh my god, what a funny bit. Seriously, Captain Hook is peak. It's hard to argue against that. And this is where I'd rank Tamatoa. If he counted!
Minions of Hades, have you heard the news?
Well, if it isn't my second favorite Hades. First is Kid Icarus Uprising, don't even ask. Honestly, it's hard to name a funnier Disney villain. Like, I don't know, man. I think our resident Lord of the Underworld easily takes the cake in that department. James Woods sucks, and I mean really, really sucks. But man, does he imbue what could have been a pretty standard villain, with so much delectable charisma and humor. It's a little hard to call Hades a 10 out of 10 phenomenal villain, because he does have some pretty significant weaknesses in terms of servicing his story. I find it insane that he never found out about Hercules still being alive in those 18 years he was planning up this big takeover scheme. Surely at some point he would have talked to Zeus, even if he didn't want to, right? He also lacks a compelling relationship and dynamic with Hercules, probably because he only meets him at the hour and 7-minute mark in the movie when there's only 30 minutes left in the runtime. He plays off his minions and Nutmeg incredibly well for the vast majority of the movie, but you know, I do like when the villain has an interesting relationship with the hero. That would have been nice. And he's the first Disney Renaissance villain to not get his own song. The only one where it's a little egregious because it would have fit the tone of the film really well. Everything else about this guy though is so peak. There's about 1 million line deliveries from him that stick out in my head. Like, even when a line isn't funny, the way he delivers it is. Mr. Hey You, Get Off of My Cloud. Oh my god, I love this character so much. They also add such eye-popping fire effects to him whenever he gets enraged, as if his consistently flaming hair wasn't a cool enough bit of animation. He's got a design that manages to be dark and creepy, while also suiting his comedic personality perfectly. Like, I don't know how they did it. His face screams both sinister ruler of the underworld, and this guy has a funny face. What a feat. And this balance of massive goofball and legit great villain extends to his personality as well. He's the only villain that can sassily chastise Meg's taste in men, and then follow that up a mere 10 seconds later with the actually sinister, I think he does, Meg. I truly think he does. Hercules is my all-time favorite Disney film for a variety of reasons, but aside from maybe the music, I think Hades might genuinely be the best element of the entire film. Despite his flaws, he is undoubtedly the breakout character. The one element where even the people who hate this movie say, yeah, he's pretty good. There's just this delicious energy to him. That's the only word I can use to describe it. He's deliciously petty, deliciously methodical, deliciously funny. Every second he's on screen elevates the movie so much, and that's exactly what you want out of your villain. I do think the whole not meeting Hercules sooner than the final act thing does stick out a little poorly, but other than that, he's an absurdly fantastic, entertaining, and effective villain. Him stringing Meg along the entire movie is enough to get you to root against him, I think. And yeah, it was really funny when he said, insert funny Hades quote here. Oh, what a practical joker. Ooh, that scoundrel, that Hades, oh brother.
Morgana's crazy sister.
You know, all things considered, Ursula doesn't really have a lot of screen time over the course of this movie. She kind of just makes her deal with Ariel and then sits back and watches her flounder for the most part, only getting directly involved at the last minute. It's also crazy how none of this dragged her down in the rankings one bit. Because oh my god, she is and will always be one of the greatest Disney villains. Every line delivery and facial expression that comes from her is unbearably malice-filled and memorable. And she's consistently funny throughout the entire film. Such a dramatic diva who sprinkles so much personality onto every last line of dialogue she has. Like, a normal, boring-ass villain would probably deliver a line like, "Life's full of tough choices, isn't it?" But who needs that when we have Ursula going,
"Life's full of tough choices, isn't it?"
That one line delivery is really emblematic of what a winning and delightful personality she has. All while racking up a terrifying collection of poor unfortunate souls who couldn't abide by her terms and conditions. Okay, to her credit though, she does clearly lay all of that out for Ariel. Like yeah, she tries to sabotage her after the deal is struck, but she was still pretty upfront about owning Ariel's soul if she couldn't get Eric to kiss her. She doesn't need to use tricky green hoppy metaphors like Dr. Facilier. She owns the kind of dealmaker she is, and that honestly makes me respect her way more as a villain. It's like, this sounds like the worst deal in the world. Losing your voice and potentially your entire soul just to chase a hot piece of ass. But damn it, Ursula is just so convincing and charismatic that it's hard to blame Ariel for going through with this. Everyone knows what a great villain song Poor Unfortunate Souls is. It builds and builds from its slow, sinister start to a bombastic climax. And Pat Carroll's always excellent vocal deliveries really get to shine here. And it's a great touch that she just leaves Ariel to drown afterwards. Again, she never said anything about bringing her to the surface. I just find that funny. All the stuff in the latter half of the movie with hypnotizing Eric and finally fulfilling her master gambit of taking Triton's crown for herself are rad as well. This doesn't seem like the kind of villain where it makes sense for her to turn into a kaiju, but oh my god does it work. The climax is so fun, her death scene is sick. Oh my god, I have nothing but good things to say about Ursula. One of the most iconic Disney villains for very good reason. And if you don't agree, then maybe you should take another look at her body language. Ha!
See, that's the thing, Shen. Scars heal.
I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with Scar's resume, you know? Like, he legit won. He did it. He set out to kill his brother and steal the throne, and that's exactly what he did. He was overthrown like a decade later, but until then, yeah, the Pride Lands were his. He is arguably the most accomplished Disney villain out of all of them, which already earns him a ton of points. But as an added bonus, he's also one of the most entertaining and delightful villains to watch. Jeremy Irons' voice just drips with malevolence, delivering a ton of dark, but also dryly funny lines. As if his Machiavellian aims weren't good enough, he's also an absolute self-obsessed diva who commands the screen every single time he appears. It's so sick how he constantly manipulates and gaslights Simba, including making him believe he was responsible for his father's death. As if killing the man wasn't enough, you're gonna convince his son that it was his fault? Unbelievable. And yet so diabolical that it contributes to an amazing villain. One for the animation history ages. Some people take issue with the fact that he's not really interesting as king, just kind of a petulant child who doesn't know shit about running a kingdom. But like, that's completely in line with his character in the first half of the movie. That was who he always was, and he serves as a great contrast to Mufasa as king, an absolutely selfish leader only looking out for number one. Plus, I think the main thing that still perfectly props him up is the fact that he's still as sharp as ever when Simba returns in the final act. He's still perfectly capable of manipulating Simba to the edge of a cliff, with no one leaping to help him because they all still think Mufasa's death was on him. He was just brought down by his hubris and his desire to get one last gloat in over his evil plan. And then later, his silver tongue is his undoing when he talks shit about the hyenas and they turn on him. Poetic cinema, baby. I really love how there are two instances where Scar doomed himself because he just couldn't shut the fuck up. It's very in line with his self-obsessed diva-ish character. Oh yeah, I forgot to write this in the script, but he also has one of the best villain songs of all time. You already know this though. Overall, a sensational villain I have no real problems with. He's a blast and a menace to watch from start to finish. But the top spot just barely eluded him. Because, well, it wasn't even close. I knew going into this that no other Disney villain even remotely stood a chance against Judge Claude Frollo, the single most evil character to ever come out of Walt Disney Animation Studios. He actively persecutes marginalized groups, murders a woman in cold blood on the steps of a church, and then attempts to drown her baby in a well solely because it's ugly. And this is just the first 5 minutes of the movie. I'm consistently shocked by the lengths they go to portray him as monstrous in every sense of the word. He basically embodies most of Mother Gothel's entire role as a villain, keeping someone locked away and lying about their heritage in order to make sure they stay put. And yet, this is just the tip of the iceberg with Frollo. Like, telling Quasimodo, when your heartless mother abandoned you, anyone else would have drowned you, doesn't even crack the top 5 most evil things he does in this movie. We're talking about a guy who gives advice to a professional torturer over the best way to whip someone so they experience the most pain possible. And again, that doesn't even crack the top 5. Just when you think it can't get any worse, he starts lusting over Esmeralda, and this lust leads him to burn down Paris in search of her. Did I mention the hair sniffing scene? I should probably mention that. Not to mention, he gets by far the best villain song in all of Disney. And if you're asking me, in all of fiction. It really exemplifies the most twisted thing about him. The fact that he believes himself to be righteous in the eyes of God. An entirely delusional notion that unfortunately can and has been echoed by a lot of people in real life. Frollo is so disturbing because he's the most realistic Disney villain. His racism, his sexual degeneracy, and his attempts to use religion as a shield, and sometimes an excuse for his actions, are precisely what make him so horrifying. And the direction supports this as well as the writing. He's animated so sinisterly, with hellish colors overtaking his face in the final battle. Plus, the visuals of Hellfire are entirely his delusions. They give us a fascinating glimpse into his psyche and how he conceptualizes this internal conflict. He's equally as interesting as he is devilish, which is quite a feat considering he's willing to burn an innocent family alive just as a warning. He tries to stab Quasimodo in the back and kill him while pretending to comfort him. I swear to God, all I have to do to prove he should be number 1 is just list the things he does in the movie. You just do not get better than this. Or I guess, worse than this. Frollo is by far my pick for the greatest Disney villain of all time. And you know what? After running the numbers, he might just be my pick for the greatest animated villain of all time. Well, that's all the Disney villains ranked. Let me know in the comments if you're upset with me that I didn't include the First Order Stormtroopers from Ralph Breaks the Internet. I found this list of Disney villains on the Disney Villains fandom wiki, and it just lists them as the villains of the movie, alongside Arthur, parentheses, redeemed. I guess he did apologize after hitting DW, so that checks out. Anyway, join me for my next ranking, which I arbitrarily decided to keep top secret, just cause that sounded fun, I don't know. Here is a hint image to help you figure out what the topic will be. Okay, that's all you're getting. See you next week, maybe. It'll be the penultimate installment of the Schaeferless Sandwich 6 after all. You can't miss that. Good night, insert location tied to a Disney villain here.